And turning now to immigration, H1B visas are under fire as President Trump looks to overhaul the work visa program that many companies depend on to hire tens of thousands of employees each year. The result could affect businesses from Silicon Valley to New Delhi. Let's now go to Bloomberg News international economics and policy correspondent Michael McKee for more. Mike?
Thank you, Julie. And we are joined by Darrell Issa. He is the Republican congressman from California's 49th district, which is San Diego, Riverside County. And he is concerned about H1B visas. This is a program that allows up to 80,000 foreign workers, high-skilled foreign workers, to come to the United States on a 3-year visa every year. Every profession is eligible, but it is a cornerstone of hiring for high tech. And you say it is subject to abuse. Why do you say that? What's the problem?
Well, one of the problems is nearly half of the individuals who come are paid about $60,000 a year because of some historic loopholes, some amounts that were set 20-plus years ago. Some examples would be Disney Corp and Southern California Edison, Abbott Labs, and the University of California. They all hired or attempted to hire people that were going to displace existing workers. In other words, they went out for a contract. The contractor brought in H1B folks. Happened to be every one of them came from India, and those individuals were actually being trained, in the case of Southern California Edison, directly by the people who were being laid off. That's not the intent of the program. The intent of the program is to bring tens of thousands of the best and the brightest to the United States for jobs that are unfilled and are desperately in need of being filled, usually in the STEM science fields.
Well, you introduced legislation that would raise that minimum salary to $100,000. Is that going to cure the problem?
It'll help a lot. Actually, the rumor has it that the president may be supporting as much as $135,000, which I certainly could live with, because when you look at the best and the brightest, when you look at who Facebook is looking to hire, they're not dissuaded by a high salary for these critical people. And just to give you an example, Mike, on day one, the day these applications become available, they're oversubscribed by more than 2 times. So in other words, in a matter of hours, you have twice as many applications as you have slots. Raising the quality of who gets through this will only help America, while you still will use every single one of those thousands of slots.
Well, the government sets prevailing wages for each profession, and some say the H-1B program should be tied to that. Most H-1Bs come in at the #1 or #2 stage, raise it to 3 or 4, so you got to pay in the highest half of wages for each profession.
Well, one of the challenges in the system is you may have an extremely bright person graduating from the University of California or University of Michigan with a master's in electrical engineering. That salary may not be as high, and of course that's an entry position, even though it's highly skilled. Or you may have somebody with 20 years experience who's a radio frequency designer who wants to come to the United States. They are 2 different wage levels. The big challenge is to get rid of the job replacement low end out of the system. If we need those people, let's have a separate discussion. Most of us believe that the amount of H1 should in fact be set by the shortage and in a particular field, and not by an arbitrary number like 60 or 80,000.
Well, the other concern people have is the way the visas are allocated. Right now, it's a lottery system. The more you enter, the more visas you get. And a lot of Indian outsourcing companies that act as employment agencies end up entering a lot and getting a lot of visas. 70%, some 70% of the visas granted go to Indians. Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren from San Francisco area suggests getting rid of that lottery system and just tying it to the amount people are willing to pay. The more you pay, the more likely you are to get a visa. Would you support something like that?
Actually, Zoe and I worked on that exact piece of legislation last year, and then she walked away from it as we got very close to my reelection. It is a good system that she's proposing. It's extremely complex. The one that is currently being done by the president potentially, and the one that I offered is simpler, and it does take care of part of the problem. But I certainly would embrace any system that allocates the best and the brightest, combination of higher pay and skill level as a replacement for the lottery system. And so that's a place in which I think all of us, and especially those who care about the high-tech community, including San Jose, where Zoe Lofgren's from, would support. One of the challenges we have, though, is we don't have an allocation for people who graduate from our prestigious universities with high-skilled labor who have already proven during their graduate work to be of value. We don't have a separate allocation to retain those people. And that's another part where President Trump and this new administration have to reach out and say, how do we get, keep, and improve the highest skill level, particularly in these shortage areas of the modern economy? And so H1 is a small part of a bigger problem. The skills visa in general are going to have to be looked at, along with the reorganization of government, to take advantage of these high-skilled. And that's where I'm excited about a new administration that does seem to be outreaching to the community. And if they keep doing it, I think we'll get some real immigration reform that changes from just people coming to us selecting, to the greatest extent possible, the best and the brightest.
Well, you mentioned the president. During the campaign, he said H1B visas were being abused and the system should be abolished. But no surprise, during the campaign, he also said it's a great system and we just need to fix it. Have you talked to the White House? Do you have any idea where the president is on this? Is he going to support your legislation? There's also talk that he wants to put out an executive order.
Well, I've talked to the president several times. This is an area where he discussed it openly with the tech leaders, including Elon Musk, Tim Cook, Brad Smith, and others. And he's made it clear that H1 is here to stay, but he wants to get H1B to work properly. He's aware of some of these programs, used a version of it for his temporary workers at resorts. He knows it can be gamed, and he wants to get rid of the gaming. The president's draft executive order, quite frankly, is a good one. I would certainly support it, but I'll tell you, the day it comes out, I'm going to want to codify it in law, because I don't want it to be just executive action. I want it to be the will of the people, that we do welcome people, but we want to get the best and the brightest, and this program has not been living up to that. As you say, 70% are basically consulting workers, the vast majority at the bottom of that range, about $60,000. That's not the definition of high-skilled labor in America today.
Got your bill almost through last time, 30 seconds left with the president's support. Do you expect this to become law in 2017?
I do. I expect us to do bipartisan immigration reform that deals particularly with the high skills, but hopefully in the later part of this year we'll also get into dealing with our agricultural needs and so on. The president met at least one time for almost an hour with a specialist to look at the agriculture sector. So high skilled, absolutely. But remember, we've got to eat in this country, and I think both are going to get taken up in 2007. Hopefully at least one, if not all of them, would get passed.